Hey, welcome back everyone to Patriot Knife and Tool Works. It's a thankful Thursday. I'm up and running. I was pretty wiped out last night from a long knife day. You watched my other episodes. From yesterday, I had picked up a bunch of slip joints and stuff and one fixed blade knife. They're all ready to go, folks. I'm ready to oil them up. After doing the final cleaning, before I oil them, I get them out. I take my air compressor with my little nozzle and I blow everything out. But I want to share before we get going on today's episode, because it's a very special one. I really spent some time pulling this stuff out to do an episode on this subject. But before we do that, this is one of those knives that I picked up yesterday, and I shared it a little bit. I had a couple subscribers comment in about it. They're kind of a little bit knowledgeable about this stuff. But so Dixon Cutlery Company, France. A lot of people might think this is a butcher knife, but it's an early Bowie knife, an early Bowie hunter. And I'm going to show you. Here is a Sheffield Tillotson from 1850. This knife here is from right after the turn of the century. But here's an 1850 small Sheffield Bowie knife, kind of in the same fashion as this Dixon knife right here. You can see for yourself. Yeah, so it helps to kind of know what you're looking for. This was a great find right here. Yeah. All right, I'm going to move this stuff, and we are going to sail off across the wide ocean blue, folks, because we're going to get into some Scrimshaw, some carvings. We're gonna be diving into the days of the old ships a little bit. I pulled out photographs. I've got a couple knives to share. I got some amazing ivory carvings. I'm going to cover the gamut, so I don't want this to go too long. But folks, trim your sails and get ready, because we're going to roll here. All right, so the days of the wooden ships. It's always fascinated me. It's one of the historical areas that I really, really love. And this is one of the best books on the old whaling ships. There's photographs in here. And so there's a whaling ship right there. I believe I have a photograph of that one. If not, it's one of them. And I'm going to show that to you. But this is just an incredible book, folks. Incredible book. Look at that carving right there. And that's why we're going to kind of get into the carving end of it, which is really, really, to me, so cool. Because we're going to cover kind of, I've got some carvings from the Civil War that were done by soldiers. I got carvings done by American Indians, Native Americans, and whalers. And so we're going to get into it. The days of the whaling ships, folks. Fascinating. I think of, just what it would have been like to get aboard an old wooden ship, and to go explore a new continent. Many, many people are buried at sea. The explorers, a lot of those ships went down at sea, folks. And it was just the way it was. But talk about what an adventure it must have been. Incredible to think about. I love this era. And you can get into the whole military aspect of the early naval ships. They were wood. They were wooden ships like this. And the old cannons and everything. This is a subject that just doesn't get shared very much. Unless you were grew up in New Bedford, Massachusetts, or along that New England coastal area, you're probably not gonna know that much about this aspect of history. So I'm going to cover it a little bit here. So yeah, we're going to look at, I hear a couple books here. This is a book by Norm Flaterman here. Let's see. Yep, Norm Flaterman and Company. See him right there. Yep. Norm Flaterman was he's the one that wrote the huge Bowie knife book, and he's, knife collector, historian, collector of many, many historical items. Passed away about 15 years ago. This is a great book, man. Small Arms of the Sea Services. And so this gets into, naval swords, everything, folks. It gets into it. And so I'm going to share with you here, these are naval dirks, carved ivory handles here. These are from 1820 time period right here. And this naval dirk right here in this photograph, this is it right here. That's the one. I had a little bit of money, and when Norman Flaterman passed away, they had an auction. I discovered an auction. This is, 15, 20 years ago or so. And I couldn't afford much, but I bought this. And so that's it right here in his book. This was one of Norman Flaterman's ivory carved naval dirks. The lighting's not great. I might have to up the lighting here, but gold filigree in there and everything. It's just absolutely it's an incredible piece. I'm blessed to be caretaking this. 1820, folks. Yeah, this would have been carried on a ship, a naval ship, around the War of 1812 time period, and would have been carried by an officer on the ship, midshipman. Yep. Isn't that cool? Great book, man. Pick it up. All right, we're going to get into some whaling history and whatnot. I do have another naval dirk that's later on. This is probably from about 1900. This is a more recent find. That a big old naval dirk here. Yeah, pretty interesting, pretty cool. All right, man. Let's get into the whaling ships and whalers. Let's look at this. This is an incredible piece, folks. This is a ivory cane top. And look at the carving here. This is the coolest cane top that I have ever seen, honestly. Some of them carved cane tops and fancy carved walking sticks and canes are pretty cool. I've seen all different kinds. That might be the carver's signature, but this is a carved by a whaler, no doubt. But look at this. Look at this pipe right here. Eye patch. Is this Blackbeard? Look at the teeth, folks. You see the scarf here? Estimated age on this, 1850, somewhere in there. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, that's an amazing piece I just was blessed with. All right, let's get into some more cool stuff. Here's another knife, folks. Look at this knife here. Very early whaler's knife, carved by a whaler. Very cool. Yeah, a little needle on this side here. I need to oil this up. That's whalebone right there. That's not the ivory tooth, but that's carved out of the whalebone. That's an early knife. I don't know how old that is. Probably 1850s, 30s, maybe older. All right, let's get into. Here's a carved ivory box. And that is the carver right there that made this box. Probably on a whaling ship, 1871, Mr. Tice. Pretty cool. Yeah, Moby Dick. Any of you seen that movie, In the Heart of the Sea? That's a pretty amazing movie. All right, here's a genuine whale tooth. This small one, but this is a genuine one. This was carved probably Scrimshaw in probably the 1850s, 60s. Yeah, you just don't see this stuff. Whalebone carved little sword. Yeah, those whalers had a lot of time on their hands, folks. Here's a bodkin. Yeah, they carved all kinds of stuff. This is whalebone here. Yeah, genuine stuff. A lot of fakes and replicas of this stuff nowadays. I've got some other cool stuff here. Yeah, here's another whalebone. Kind of like a little awl. Carved by a whaler. Let's see what else. I'll share this here. This is kind of in my. This is a tusk, probably of a walrus or one of those seafaring animals. This was carved in 1889, I think, or 91. Carved by a whaler. That's Buffalo Bill Cody right there, William F. Cody. And this is a souvenir that a whaler probably carved it. In the 1880s and early 1890s, Buffalo Bill went all over Europe, England, France, Germany, you name it, with his Wild West show. A whaler, no doubt whalers were working on those ships. They were not the wooden ship, they were the early metal hull ships. But no doubt there were sailors that were old whalemen at that time in the 1890s. Isn't that cool? That's kind of in my Old West stuff there. All right. Got some, here's another cool little, look at this is whalebone. Neat little dagger knife that a whaler made. Yeah, probably gave to his kid or something. All right, I got some other carvings, but we're going to take a look at, let's take a look here. Yeah, this is Norm Flederman's book on whaling and the Scrimshaw and the history of the whalers and the men that carved the ivory and the whalebone. Here's a fantastic photograph, folks, taken probably 1860. A man, probably, I don't know if he's on a whaling ship, probably. Original photograph taken on the deck of the ship. Look at this. Amazing photograph, folks. And this is in English. And I've used a loop to decipher it. It says something like, well, he wrote this and gave this photograph to a friend. And he said, well, my friend, I'm sailing off to another adventure. Ahoy. I'll see you again someday. You know, kind of goes on a little bit, but really, really neat photograph. One of a kind, really. I've never seen another one quite like that. Let's get into, let's get into something here that you just don't see. Way back in the days of the ships, those wooden ships and the whalers, they went around Cape Horn. They went around the Horn in the 1600s, 1700s, looking for treasures, the gold of the Sierra Madre, and a lot of your coins were minted down in South America, way down along the tip. And this is a pieces of 8 from 1793. It's silver. And they find a lot of these in shipwrecks that are date way earlier than this, and a lot of other silver and gold coins. But no doubt this coin here was on a wooden ship at some point. Somebody sailing over to America maybe in 1810, 1820, somewhere in there. So here is a cross made from pieces of 8. So this was made down in South America, Mexico, right in there. You had your Spanish missions and everything. And what some silversmiths would do is they would take coins like this, pound them out, and make crosses and other things. And that's what this is. Cross made from pieces of 8. Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, let's get into, I'm going to share one more cool thing, whaling related. And then we're going to get into some photographs of American Indians, Eskimos. And so we're going to rock and roll here. I'm going to show you now this is this little box here I'm showing you is basically kind of folk art, but I want you to take a look here. That's an ambrotype, a glass photograph of a whaling captain right there. That's whalebone. It's a little bookmark, Scrimshaw. Look at that fancy pie crimper. Now this ambrotype glass photograph of a whaling captain is absolutely a treasure. Rare. Super rare, folks. And inside of it, I put this together from 100-year-old trim wood off of an old house. It's probably older than 100 years. This is a photograph of a famous whaling ship docked at New Bedford, Massachusetts. It's a famous whaling ship. It's a huge cabinet photograph, folks. So though I've never been back there, I want to get back to that area of the United States because it would be so incredible, man. That the days of the wooden ship. That's a famous ship there, folks. I've got the information written on the back. But I crafted this folk art box out to house this stuff. And let me see if I can carefully pull this over for you to look at. That ship is the Bark Wanderer. It's written on the back of the cabinet photo. That photograph was taken in 1890 in New Bedford Harbor. It says launched in 1878 from the J.H. Holmes and Sons shipyard, Mattapoisett, Massachusetts, the last great whaling ship. The ship wrecked off of Cuttyhunk Island on August 25th, 1924, just a little over 100 years ago. The Wanderer. Yeah, pretty cool historic photograph, folks. So let's get into some American Indian photographs and a couple other neat carvings, and then we're going to wrap this up. So let me bring them up here. I put them on my iPad here. Yeah, man, the land of the totem poles. Yep, the land of the totem poles. That's a snapshot photograph there. And the indigenous people along the coast from around Seattle all the way up through British Columbia into Alaska and that, they were carvers. Pretty cool, huh? Let's take a look at another one here. All right, this is an old photograph, probably 1900. This was taken in Seattle, Washington. Look at these guys. They look like Eskimos, don't they? Yeah, when you got around Astoria, Oregon, and Seattle, everything was just totally different there. The American Indians had a lot more Asian blood mixed in there, and they look more like Eskimos. This is taken in British Columbia. Look at the carving there. Look at that boat. These are circa 1900 photographs. Look at that carving. That's a grave there. Look at the boardwalk here. Bella Coola. Bella Coola. I don't know if any of these carvings are still around. They might be. Now look at these Bella Coola Indian kids on this boardwalk. 1900. Look at the carvings, folks. There you go, man. Let's go ahead and I'll unsheath this thing here for you. Where are we at? Here we go. That is an ivory handled copper knife from the Copper Eskimo people. Let's take another look at it here. Yep. From the Copper Eskimo people. So I'm going to show you, we're going to work our way. I'll show you some Copper Eskimos here in a second. These guys are up in Canada. On the back it's just written Canada, but yeah, these are Canadian Indians along the coast, Canada somewhere. You see the muckaluk boots there. Eskimos, Fort Churchill, 100 years ago. Yep. Look at this photograph here. That's an old snapshot, 100 years old, or older maybe. Eskimo woman, Nome, Alaska. Look at that. Isn't she pretty? Here's some old characters here. Got their names too written on the back. Copper Eskimo men from, well, I missed it on the photograph. It tells where it's from. there was an abundance of copper up along the coast, starting from around Seattle all the way up into Alaska. That's why these Eskimos here are called copper Eskimos. They made things out of copper. I included this because this is a photograph of a Micmac woman, probably taken in 1904. But this is on the New England coast. The Micmacs were up around Nova Scotia along the New England coast, and they had a lot of cedar to be able to make cedar houses like the American Indians from Seattle all the way up into Alaska. And the Micmacs did a lot of carving too. This guy here, he's kind of famous. He went to the North Pole in 1909 with Admiral Perry. Look at his gun right there. Isn't that cool? Yeah. Yeah, here's an Eskimo man with his dog. Those dogs are interesting here. All right, here's Eskimo men, Nome, Alaska, standing by their Umiak boat. Their seal-covered kayak, basically. That's circa 1900 photograph. This is super rare, folks. Feast your eyes on this. This is so rare. These are American Indians on the northern Oregon coast. It's a family. That is so rare. How many photographs? Because, folks, this is probably taken in 1900, but by then, a lot of these tribes and a lot of these people were gone, man. I mean, their villages were gone and everything. But that's a rare photograph, man. I've never seen. Look at, they're standing right there. This is probably somewhere around Astoria, Oregon. Isn't that cool? Yeah. Okay. Here, this is up in British Columbia, Alaska. Look at that dog. Look at this gal with her dog. Look at that cool dog right there. Little British Columbia, Alaskan kid. This is up in Alaska. Here is a really, really amazing photograph taken around Seattle. And this is a coastal, probably a Chinook Indian with a sea captain. This is in the days of the wooden ship because this was taken probably about 1890. And look at this carved pipe this ship captain has in his hands. Look at that. Now that was carved by the American Indians. He didn't carve that. It's a wooden pipe, and looks like I'm sure they've got their great big wooden whaling boats. The Indians along the northern Washington coast and that they did some whaling. Yeah, this is a big cabinet photograph here. Look at the reindeer. Is that it? Yeah, that's it, folks. All right, so the copper Eskimos. Yeah. That's what that knife is. It's pretty rare. But I got a couple more carvings, and I want to end it because it's going way too long. Here is a copper ulu knife for scraping seal hides, walrus hides. And check, this has whale fur down inside there. Pretty amazing. Yeah. Big one. What else do we got here? I've got some other carvings. This is that's carved by a prisoner during the Civil War. I've shown this stuff maybe before. Here's a Civil War carving. So soldiers during the Civil War, especially when they were imprisoned in some of those prisons, this is just, I don't know what kind of bone this is. It's probably not whalebone. Civil War carvings here. This is ivory here. This was probably carved by a whaler. These are cufflinks, probably carved out in 1870s, 80s. Would have been worn by probably a gambler or something. Here's a whalebone necklace here. Pretty cool. And one more item, and I'm going to wrap it up, man. It's gone long. This is really, really cool, man. This is Civil War also. There's a soldier right there. He was a major. Major Finlay, 1864. 19th Regiment, Pennsylvania Volunteer Cavalry. And this is made out of some kind of bone. I don't know what it is. But, yeah. Scrimshaws and Scrimshanders. And not just whalers did carving, folks. American Indians did. Soldiers during the Civil War. You name it, man. Thanks for watching. God bless.